Now, 2023 has been a rocky year for South Africa's automotive industry. Loadshedding, logistical challenges at Transnet-run ports and the struggling economy have contributed immensely to a decline in new vehicle sales in this current financial year. But how dire is the situation for car manufacturers and retailers? Mikel Mabasa from the Automotive Business Council now joins us via Zoom. Thank you so much for your time this evening and for joining us, Mikel. What specific economic conditions are causing the decline in vehicle sales?
Thank you very much, Katleho, and good to see you. Well, it's a multiplicity of different challenges that we've seen this year, particularly as we got onto the fourth quarter of the year, where we've seen a very, very sharp downturn, particularly in relation to some of the logistical challenges that we have in South Africa today, which are well documented. I think many of us are aware of the challenges we have at Transnet, the ability to be able to bring in new vehicles into the country because we import quite a very huge amount of vehicles into the country. But similarly also, we also export a lot of vehicles out of South Africa. In fact, 64% of the vehicles that we produce in the country today are actually exported into 152 different markets around the world. So some of the challenges that we have currently in the logistical ecosystem have impacted quite dramatically in terms of new vehicle sales in the country. And of course, load shedding continues to also be a very big challenge for us.
And what demographic groups are most affected by this decline?
Well, look, I think if you look at it from a corporate point of view, you'd recall that we've got three sets of main customers. The first one is obviously you and I as consumers who go into a dealership to buy a particular vehicle. Young people, particularly those who are coming into new job opportunities, many of them have obviously shown a lot of interest, and we've seen a big upswing in terms of young people going into procurement of new vehicles, because many of them take up roles that requires mobility in order for them to be able to move from one place to the other. The second key category for us is our rental business. We've got a lot of rental companies in the country, and this time, particularly around the festive season, many of them normally ramp up their stock so that they can be able to make sure that they're able to respond to the festive season, because a lot of people are traveling. Many of them require hired vehicles. Many people are flying up and down the country. When they get to different airports, they obviously require vehicles to be able to move them up and down. And we've seen a very, very sharp decline in terms of many of our rental companies restocking and buying new vehicles, particularly during this particular quarter. And then the last one is really government sales. Because government, because they provide services to our citizens, they also require quite a lot of vehicles in order for them to be able to move around, whether it's police vehicles, whether it's vehicles that are servicing government departments, whether at national, provincial, and also at municipal level. We've also seen a very sharp decline in terms of sales that are coming through from government, because many of them also do a lot of sales during this time of the year, because some of them are obviously pushing those budgets because they are moving into the new year next year, and they don't want to move into a new year with a massive carryover. But we've seen some massive austerity cuts from government departments, and that's why there's been a massive slowdown in terms of new vehicle sales.
And in classifying these three groupings, and we're going back to the first grouping being the consumer, you and I, how are the preferences then shifting as a result of this economic condition? Are we seeing people downgrading their cars? Are we seeing more people buying second-hand cars? What's the preference looking like currently?
Well, look, it's a combination of the two. I mean, a lot of households, they own two vehicles or more. We're seeing a lot of households obviously selling one vehicle and remaining with one, so that at least there's still mobility. We've also seen quite a lot of customers trading downwards instead of buying those luxury vehicles, particularly this time of the year, Katleho, because you'd recall that many companies around this time, they obviously also give their employees bonuses, and we have not seen a very huge uptake of new vehicles, particularly those luxury brands. We've seen a lot of customers obviously buying your brand new, level entry vehicles, and then of course some obviously moving towards the second-hand market quite very, very strongly.
And speaking of that, then, are there specific vehicle segments that are affected? Are we seeing maybe more vehicles used for business purposes as opposed to those luxury brands that you mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've seen obviously a lot of South Africans moving into the bakkie market. So the light commercial vehicles, bakkies are absolutely very attractive for many South Africans, but primarily because bakkies are very, very adaptable for both commercial purposes, particularly your double cab, a segment, because you can also still be able to use that as a family vehicle. And we've seen obviously a very, very sharp growth in that particular segment of the market. We've also seen a very decent growth in our crossover, particularly new entrants, Chinese brands that are coming into the market have also grown quite very substantially relative to your traditional brands like your German brands that have been in the market for the longest time. So I think we are absolutely seeing some very, very interesting trends that are coming up, despite the fact that it is obviously on a very low base, because customers are absolutely holding back on those purchases. And I'm sure that also the interest rates, have also impacted quite hugely on those purchasing decisions, particularly this year.
And then that holding back, then I'm sure there's a huge effect on the automakers themselves. How are they responding to the decline in sales? Are we seeing more discounts being given out? Is there a reduction in production?
Well, absolutely. So I think automakers have obviously been very agile. They've obviously introduced quite a very, very attractive marketing campaigns. As we also move now, we've seen quite a number of them during the Black Friday weekend. We are now moving into the Christmas break, and I'm sure that many of them will also be accelerating quite a lot of those marketing deals into the new year so that they can be able to attract quite a number of new customers to be able to still be able to take up, because it's also not in their best interest to keep too much stock in their dealer floors. They want to be able to move those cars out from the dealers as quickly as possible, and they will obviously be doing those deals. And it's obviously auguring very well for consumers, because consumers who can still be able to make those purchases are able to get fantastic deals. And we've also seen banks as well also coming to the fray, where they're also giving their customers very, very attractive trading terms in order for customers to be able to afford the monthly installments, where banks are also stretching quite very extensively some of the repayment periods to be able to allow consumers to be able to buy new vehicles.
So is this a good time to buy?
Absolutely. It is absolutely a very good time to buy. I think consumers obviously have to be playing a very, very important role to measure their purse quite very strongly, because in South Africa in particular, buying a brand new car is the second biggest investment for many, many South Africans after buying property. So we obviously want to urge a lot of customers not to run into those purchasing decisions. They've got to look at interest rates. They've got to go into those conversations with their banks, understand exactly what those repayments are, and also factor in the total cost of running a vehicle, because a lot of customers, particularly those who are buying second-hand vehicles, they actually forget that many of these second vehicles do not have your service plan, where you can still be able to service your vehicle through your dealership without necessarily paying extra costs. Many of our second-hand vehicles are out of model plan, and many customers forget that they need to factor in those general cost of running that particular vehicles. And of course, we are also watching the petrol price, the diesel price, and we really want to urge our customers, particularly during this time, not to make those quick decisions, but absolutely look at their purse before they make the final decisions.
Most certainly. And of course, this will certainly have an impact on the broader economy. Are we knowing what the numbers are currently in terms of the job losses that could be expected out of this decline?
Well, look, I think the OEMs, Katleho, have been absolutely introspective in the last 4 years since COVID-19. We are very proud in the automotive industry that we have not seen major job losses within the sector. We do not anticipate any new job losses as we go into 2024. And we're very grateful that many of them have really stayed the course, and they've really kept as many employees still in their jobs as much as possible, despite obviously very, very tough economic conditions that we've seen. And obviously, next year is going to be a very interesting year. We are moving into an election year, and I'm sure that a lot of people will be watching whether they would be making those decisions early. We know, for an example, that government also, as I indicated earlier on, is unlikely to be making major decisions in terms of procurement as we move into the first and the second quarters of next year. And we're obviously hoping that things will obviously begin to stabilize, hopefully in the third quarter of 2024. So it's going to be a tough year, and I think we obviously want to caution all our consumers to obviously be very careful when they make those purchasing decisions.
Most certainly going to be a very tough year. Mr. Mabasa, thank you so much for your time this evening and for those insights. A good time to buy, but certainly one that needs to be looked at very closely. That's Mr. Mikel Mabasa, the Automotive Business Council CEO.